People assume that they just kind of drilled everything into me and taught me everything, but Dad taught me that for drums, and from there I taught myself.
It's hard to not have a person in your life that you thought you wanted to spend the rest of your life with.
Yeah.
What if your last name was legendary, but all it brought you was pressure, grief, and silence? Wolfgang Van Halen wasn't just born into music. He was born into the weight of a legacy so heavy, it nearly broke him. But what he did next, no one saw it coming. From the moment Wolfgang Van Halen entered the world in 1991, he was surrounded by the echoes of a name that defined a generation. As the son of legendary guitarist Eddie Van Halen and acclaimed actress Valerie Bertinelli, his life began not in silence, but in the quiet hum of legacy. Yet, for all the noise outside, the Van Halen household remained surprisingly grounded. Valerie made sure Wolfgang experienced a childhood that resembled normalcy, not celebrity. Instead of being handed a guitar at birth, he was encouraged to explore the world as any child would, through toys, cartoons, and curiosity. Even as fans celebrated Eddie across the globe, within the home, he was just Dad, gentle, supportive, and reserved. There were no red carpets or recording booths in Wolfgang's early memories, just a safe space to grow up without expectation. But as he grew older, the truth about his family's global influence started to sink in. One day, Wolfgang stumbled upon Van Halen albums bearing his name and his father's image. In that moment, the innocence of childhood began to give way to the weight of inheritance, a burden he never asked for, but one he could never fully escape. The quiet start to a lifelong passion. Music didn't arrive in Wolfgang's life as a command, it arrived as a whisper. At around 8 years old, Eddie Van Halen placed a pair of drumsticks in his son's hands, not to mold a mini prodigy, but to share something deeply human: rhythm. Eddie didn't reach for the spotlight or push Wolfgang into his shadow. Instead, he showed him how to hit a stack of magazines in time, emphasizing feel over form. This unorthodox lesson wasn't about technique, it was about patience and presence. Slowly, the gentle sounds of stick on paper turned into focused practice sessions with a real drum kit. Wolfgang began spending hours immersed in rhythm, not because he was told to, but because something inside him connected to the beat. His father never hovered. He listened from a distance, watching his son discover music on his own terms. By the time Wolfgang surprised his uncle Alex, Van Halen's legendary drummer, with his growing talent, it was clear this wasn't forced. It was earned. Still, Wolfgang was shielded from the idea of legacy. At this point, he wasn't chasing fame. He was building a foundation. What began as child's play had quietly grown into something powerful, something lasting. From rhythm to melody, forging his own sound. As the years passed, Wolfgang's musical journey began to evolve. No longer content with the drums alone, his teenage curiosity pulled him toward the guitar. But learning from Eddie Van Halen was no easy task. Wolfgang once joked that his father's way of teaching was to say, "Do this," and then perform something utterly impossible. It became clear that the gift Eddie carried couldn't be passed down in a conventional sense. So Wolfgang took matters into his own hands. He taught himself, learning tabs, diving into the music of Blink-182, System of a Down, and shaping his own sound far from the soaring solos of Van Halen lore. He wasn't interested in imitation. He wanted realness, modern edge, and raw emotion. This decision to step away from his father's shadow was both protective and rebellious. If he didn't define himself now, others would. And in a world where every riff and lyric would inevitably be compared to Eddie's legacy, Wolfgang knew he had to be something else, someone else. He wasn't trying to be the next Eddie Van Halen. He was fighting to be the first Wolfgang Van Halen. Stepping into the storm, joining Van Halen at 15. In 2006, the unthinkable happened. At just 15, Wolfgang was invited to join Van Halen as their new bassist. The announcement stirred the rock world. Some saw it as exciting, others as controversial. Replacing longtime member Michael Anthony wasn't just a career move, it was a public trial. For Wolfgang, the decision wasn't made lightly. He agreed, but with humor shielding his nerves. "I'll do it, but I'm not doing any bass solos." Underneath the joke was a teen stepping onto a stage built for legends, aware that judgment was already waiting. The 2007-2008 reunion tour with David Lee Roth became Wolfgang's rite of passage. Every city, every performance was a test of legitimacy. The audience didn't just want music, they wanted proof. Was this teenager riding coattails, or did he belong? Behind the scenes, the pressure was immense, but Wolfgang endured. His playing impressed even skeptical fans, and slowly, criticism gave way to reluctant admiration. Still, the scrutiny left lasting marks. This wasn't just a tour, it was a crash course in fame, identity, and survival. Balancing pain and progress, finding his voice. Despite the growing acclaim, Wolfgang never fully escaped the whispers of doubt. For many, he was still Eddie's kid, not yet his own artist. Every note he played came with commentary. Every photo was a headline about lineage. Even his 2012 work on Van Halen's album A Different Kind of Truth didn't silence the skeptics. Behind the smiles, the emotional toll was mounting. "It did a lot of damage to me," he later admitted. But rather than retreat, Wolfgang turned to resilience. He joined Tremonti, the band led by Mark Tremonti of Creed, not as a famous son, but as a hardworking musician eager to earn his place. It was a bold move that required starting from scratch, rehearsing overnight, touring nonstop, and proving that he wasn't writing a name, he was building a brand. In this chapter, Wolfgang began to break away from his father's orbit. It wasn't about rejection, it was about independence. The same rhythm he'd learned as a boy now carried him forward, even when the world couldn't yet hear his own beat. A loss that changed everything. In October 2020, Wolfgang's world shattered. After years of battling illness, Eddie Van Halen passed away. For the world, it was the end of a musical era. For Wolfgang, it was a deeply personal heartbreak. "Some days are better than others," he said tearfully in interviews. "It doesn't seem like the pain will ever go away." The grief was raw, consuming, and nearly paralyzing. But within that grief, Wolfgang found a way to connect with himself, with his father's memory, and with the music that had always tied them together. He began writing, not for charts or critics, but for healing. Every note became a form of remembrance, every lyric a quiet goodbye. Instead of retreating into silence, he transformed sorrow into sound. What could have been the end of his journey became a rebirth. And as the world mourned Eddie Van Halen, Wolfgang began the delicate process of emerging, not just as a son left behind, but as an artist stepping forward. Mammoth WVH, claiming his musical identity. In 2021, Wolfgang released something deeply personal, Mammoth WVH, his debut solo album. The title was no accident. Mammoth had once been the name of his father's early band, long before Van Halen became a household name. By reviving it, Wolfgang wasn't just honoring the past, he was reshaping it. What made the album remarkable wasn't just its sound, but its process. Every instrument, drums, guitar, bass, vocals, was played by Wolfgang alone. This wasn't a group project. It was a one-man labor of love. The album's lead single, Distance, written in memory of Eddie, climbed to the top of the charts and earned him a Grammy nomination. For the first time, Wolfgang felt truly seen, not as a shadow, but as a standalone talent. At the 2022 Grammys, accompanied by his mother Valerie and fiancée Andrea, Wolfgang posed with humor and humility. "We came, we saw, but we didn't conquer," he joked. Yet the emotional weight of that moment, the full-circle journey from son to artist, was undeniable. He had done it on his own. Love, Marriage, and a song that spoke volumes. 2023 brought a new chapter for Wolfgang, one marked by love and memory. After 8 years together, he married photographer Andrea Alsop in an intimate Los Angeles ceremony. But this wasn't just a celebration of romance, it was a tribute to legacy. As he walked down the aisle with his mother, the ceremony played Eddie Van Halen's instrumental 316, a song Eddie had written when Wolfgang was born. It was a moment of connection, honoring the past while building a future. Valerie beamed with pride, saying, "They really get each other, they're so comfortable together." This wasn't the son of a rock god marrying into fame. It was a man, grounded in love, stepping into a new phase of life. Marriage didn't slow his momentum, it added depth. In the same year, Wolfgang released Mammoth II, once again writing, performing, and producing everything himself. Confidence now walked beside humility, and fans were finally discovering the music before discovering the name. The mission was working. He was becoming himself. Standing tall at the Oscars. If there was ever a moment that proved Wolfgang had arrived on his own terms, it was the 2024 Oscars. In a surprise performance, he joined Ryan Gosling and Slash to play I'm Just Ken from the Barbie soundtrack. As Gosling's performance lit up the stage, a guitar solo kicked in, unexpected, electric, and unmistakably Wolfgang. Right when Ryan whips out his abs, there's a solo, he laughed later. And that's me. It was surreal, he admitted, to be part of something so outside his usual realm, but that's what made it perfect. For once, he wasn't playing a role defined by others. He wasn't in the shadow of a band or a family name. He was just a musician doing what he loved on one of the biggest stages in the world. That night wasn't about proving anything. It was about being present. And for Wolfgang, presence is something he had earned, note by note, year by year. Legacy reimagined, the man he's become. Wolfgang Van Halen's journey has never been straightforward. It has been shaped by legacy, yes, but more than that, by choices. The choice to honor his roots while defining his path. The choice to transform grief into music and doubt into discipline. From the child banging on magazines to the man headlining his own tour, Wolfgang's story is a testament to quiet strength. He didn't run from the shadow of Eddie Van Halen. He learned how to walk beside it. And slowly that shadow faded, not in memory, but in dominance. Today, fans know Mammoth WVH not just as a tribute, but as a sound of its own. Critics praise his authenticity, not just his lineage. And Wolfgang, in every interview, remains gracious, self-aware, and most importantly, real. He once said, "Luckily, people are starting to become fans of the music first, and only then realize who my dad was." That's not luck. That's the result of resilience. And in this story, that's the real legacy.